speeches, including convocation addresses, keynote addresses, and Foundation Day lectures in different institutions and organizations across the country and abroad. He has been conferred with 40 honoris causa doctorate awards from prestigious universities across the globe and the country. He has been awarded 4 national and international fellowships of organizations like Indian Society for Technical Education, Computer Society of India, ICA, and APACH. He was honored with Philippines' highest award, reckoned as Asia's own Peace Prize, the Gussie Peace Prize International. The Kingdom of Bahrain decorated him with their highest civilian award, the Isa Award for Service to Humanity, with a cash prize of $1 million. He too was decorated with Mongolia's highest civilian award. Over 50 national and international awards and over 200 state honors and accolades covet him. He was awarded the Golden Gavel, the highest award of the World Congress of Poets under the World Academy of Arts and Culture affiliated to UNESCO. KIIT and KISS have been chronicled in the Limca Book of Records on 4 counts. KISS has also created 4 Guinness World Records. His contributions in the field of general and professional education, health, art, culture, literature, rural development, social service, and spiritualism has been profound. He has initiated many successful social outreach programs like Art of Giving, Kanya Kiran, Education for All, New Mind, New Dreams, Project Uday, Project Sakhi, and Kalinga Fellowship, to name a few. He has been instrumental in transforming the remote Kalarabanka village of Cuttack district in Orissa into a smart village, and also the entire Manapur Panchayat, a cluster of villages, into a model panchayat. He has been working to establish 20 branches of KISS in different districts of Orissa and another 20 across the country. One branch is already operating in the national capital of India, Delhi, since 2013, and another 2 in Bangladesh for the unprivileged children. He has already provided quality employment to over 15,000 people directly and to over 2 lakh others indirectly. He has also created 100 successful entrepreneurs across the country. He lost his father at the age of 4 and struggled through back-buckling poverty and hunger, but went on to become an iconic educationist, an emblem of humanitarian service, a beacon of light for the socially and economically suppressed for their transformation, a redeemer of the fallen, the oppressed, and the marginalized. Though he himself has led a very humble life and remained a bachelor, a life full of sacrifices and renouncements. To spread happiness and peace in the society and to see smiles in the faces of the poor and the downtrodden has been his obsession since childhood. Professor Samanta has been working relentlessly to achieve zero poverty, zero hunger, and zero illiteracy since 1987. He has served as member of the Indian Parliament Rajya Sabha in 2018-19. Currently, he is the member of Parliament Lok Sabha from Biju Janata Dal.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I, Ishan Raj,
And I, Paranyakar,
welcome all esteemed guests, distinguished speakers, corporate delegates, respected faculty members, and dear friend to the International Conference on Management Research of KIIT on the theme Chaos, Complexity, and Resilience, Business and Society in Pandemic Context. As part of the conference, we are glad to announce that we have received 117 abstracts all over India and globe, out of which 77 were full papers.
today we are honored to have with us Professor Sasmita Samanta, Vice Chancellor, KIIT, deemed to be University. Professor Saranjeet Singh, Pro Vice Chancellor, KIIT, deemed to be University. Dr. Gyanaranjan Mahanti, Registrar, KIIT. Guest of honor, Professor P.K.J. Mahapatra, Professor Emeritus, KIIT University. Professor Trilochan Tripathi, XLRI Jamshedpur, Editor, Management and Labor Studies. Professor S.N. Mishra, Dean, KIIT School of Management. Dr. S.K. Mahapatra, Director, KIIT School of Management. Respected faculties and dear students for the International Conference on Management Research of KIIT. We are happy to announce that we have Professor Justin Paul and Professor Tapas Mishra who will be joining us in the next technical sessions. Unfortunately, they couldn't join us for the inaugural session due to the difference in time zone.
KIIT deemed to be University, India's first 5-star rated university in QS rating of 2021, is among the top 10 private institutions in India to have received the Institute of Eminence status by the Ministry of HRD, Government of India. It is the state's first fledgling university to obtain a ranking of 251 to 300 in Times Higher Education World University Ranking and has been ranked #1 among self-financing institutions of the country in Atal Ranking of Institution on Innovation Achievement 2021. Excellence is not only in terms of education, but also in sports and extracurriculars. 3 students from the university proudly represent India at the Tokyo Olympics 2020. Recently, our student Duti Chand received the prestigious Arjuna Award from the Honorable President Shri Ramnath Kovind.
KIIT, deemed to be university, having a student strength of 30,000 from across 65 countries, along with the sister university, Kalinga Institute of Social Sciences, KISS, world's first exclusive, fully free tribal university for 60,000 tribal children. Were founded by Professor Dr. Achyuta Samanta, Member of Parliament, Lok Sabha, a visionary social architect and philanthropist, and one of the greatest educational leaders of India. Professor Samanta embarked on a social development mission in 1992, using education as a strategic medium to eradicate poverty, a goal envisaged by the global leaders as one of the sustainable development goals.
I request Professor Dr. Sashmita Samanta to inaugurate the conference by lighting the virtual inaugural lamp. Before starting the conference, let's just watch a glimpse of previous year conference video made by our beloved students.
To welcome the guest and to set the context of the conference, we have Professor Dr. S.N. Mishra, Dean, KIIT School of Management. He was an officer in the Indian Defence Account Service, where he served as a Director of Finance with DRDO. He did his MA in Applied Economics and has a PhD in Economics. Post-retirement, he teaches economics and contributes handsomely to prestigious research journals. Sir, kindly introduce the conference theme to the guest.
Good morning to all of you. On behalf of our redoubtable director, Professor Saroj Kumar Mahapatra, all the faculty members, students, research scholars and delegates, I very heartily welcome the guiding spirit of this university, Professor Achyutananda Samanta, who is virtually with us to this second international conference on management research. I also take this opportunity to welcome Professor Sasmita Samanta, our most dynamic Vice Chancellor, who is unfortunately not with us today because of certain inescapable engagements, but we welcome her all the same with all our sincerity. I also welcome Professor PKJ Mahapatra, who would be a very eminent researcher. He was a dean in IIT Kharagpur and very closely associated with this university for his excellent acumen in research, for sharing his thoughts. I also welcome Professor Trilochan Tripathi, Professor XLRI, to give the keynote address in the inaugural session. Let me set the context of this very important seminar. We had actually devised this conference in the backdrop of COVID-19, which actually ushered in enormous amount of chaos, crisis, and uncertainty. And therefore, most of the papers that we have received are in the theme of how to be resilient in a situation of what in economics we call as VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, and anxiety. So therefore, this is how we had envisaged this seminar. And serendipitously, we are today globally in the midst of, in the cusp of another extremely uncertain crisis, the war which is going on in Ukraine. I would like to mention, friends, in this backdrop, that there was a seminal book by George Orwell in 1945. This was his last social science novel, 1984, where he had predicted that in 1984, there would be dystopia in the world economy. And this was a counterpoint to the Marxian concept of utopia, where he foresaw that the state will wither away and communism would take over capitalism. So in response to Marxian Communist Manifesto Utopia, Orwell wrote this wonderful novel. He was a social democrat, recounting how there could be dystopia in 1984. And sadly, 38 years later, we are having that dystopia. That dystopia, he said, was because he was very anxious the way the Tsarist Russia was operating under Stalin. So therefore, it was in the backdrop of his anxiety that possibly in 1984, there could be a backlash of communism on the global soil. So ironically, we are in the cusp of another chaos and crisis. Friends, after the Second World War, we had some wonderful contribution by great French writers and diplomats, particularly Jean Monnet, who in 1951, as you would all remember, was the architect of a unity between two arch rivals of Second World War, that is France and Germany, in setting up the European Community of Steel and Coal. That was the first time the world realized that there is no permanent friend, no permanent enemy, but permanent interests. So the European Union, which came as an offshoot of this wonderful, philosophy of Jean Monnet, gave rise to the concept of supranationalism. Unfortunately, today, in the deglobalized world that we see in the pandemic, we are in the cusp of subnationalism or hypernationalism. The French President Macron, who writes himself as a Democrat, at the height of pandemic, he mentioned that France will not export wheat to any other country. This was a very interesting example of nationalism by a country which put all its weight behind liberty, equality, fraternity, and free trade. So, friends, we are going to deliberate on all these important issues. And I would like to remind you that when we are talking of volatility, chaos, and crisis, there is a wonderful fusion between social science and natural sciences. We have Hegel, who in 18th century talked of alienation. We had Emile Durkheim, the great sociologist, who talked of anomie. We also had the eminent scientist, Hensberg, who talked of the uncertainty principle. So therefore, this seminar is extremely unique, that it brings in delegates and disciplines from both the streams to deliberate on a very important issue. There is a most wonderful research article written by the convener of the seminar, Professor Bajaballabh Kar, in our most wonderful in-house journal edited by Professor Subhuti Parikalpana, where he has given a wonderful article on how do we look at chaos, crisis, and resilience. I think I would request all the delegates and I would request Professor Subhuti to please share a soft copy with all the delegates. What Professor Kar is trying to bring out, that the concept of chaos is quite interesting, and he refers to Lauder, who talks of normal chaos. How chaos can be normal. This was what Lauder thinks, that you need to make an understanding of chaos. And complexity is management of missions of critical systems. And resilience is how we respond to chaos and complex. I thought I'll just share in the next 2 minutes two very important events which are happening today. One is on the Bitcoin. Now, as you would see that today, there is a news item by the Supreme Court. They have asked the government to clarify whether the Bitcoin is legal or illegal. Now, there are three players. You have the government who thinks that we should tax them, these assets. On the other hand, it is the Supreme Court which thinks that you cannot consider these transactions to be illegal, because they think that they are buffeted by Article 19(1)(g), which talks of right to freedom of trade. And on the other hand, it is the Reserve Bank of India, which is understandably very wary of this. So you have three players and dealing with the same crypto assets, but there is a lot of uncertainty, chaos, and anxiety today. So this is therefore one doesn't really know how to handle them. The second thing I would like to mention is the challenges which we are facing today for globalization. As I mentioned a couple of minutes before, how France, the angel guardian of democracy and freedom, is imposing food nationalism. Now you see today that China has already requested Russia not to stop food imports. On one hand, USA is imposing sanctions, some of the European countries, NATO countries are imposing sanctions. On the other hand, the Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan is in Moscow asking for a contract on a gas pipeline. So it's a very interesting world. So on one hand, you have hyper-nationalism. On the other hand, people are looking at international cooperation. Energy has become a very important area. Very interestingly, Germany is very quiet because there is a gas pipeline between Russia and Germany. So therefore, there are interests, there are conflicts, there is chaos. So therefore, I must thank our director for choosing this most wonderful topic for deliberation, which I said he will synthesize people from different disciplines to cogitate. I must also thank Professor Bajrang Kar and Professor Sikta Singh for having put in enormous amount of effort to bring this seminar to fruition and to a reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your insightful words.
We are grateful to have with us Professor Dr. S.K. Mahapatra, Director, KIIT School of Management. Dr. Mahapatra has held leadership positions for over a decade in renowned corporate groups in India like Tata, Bajaj, and Jindal, including Navaratna PSU, Cell, and multinational POSCO. Is an alumnus of Delhi University and MDI Gurgaon and holds a doctorate from Utkal University. Sir, kindly address the conference.
Thank you. Esteemed Professor Trilochan Tripathi, keynote speaker, Professor PKJ Mahapatra, our esteemed guest of honor, my colleague, Dean Professor S.N. Mishra, Professor Nishit Parida, Director, School of Management, my fellow directors and deans of KIIT University who are present here, Professor Brajavallabh Kara and Professor Sikta Singh, convener and co-conveners of ICMR 2022, faculty colleagues at the School of Management and School of Rural Management who are present here now, esteemed guests, all the participating research scholars who shall be presenting the paper in the ensuing 5 technical sessions, and my dear students. At the outset, let me extend warm greetings to you on behalf of Honorable Founder and the entire management of KIIT University, and on behalf of my colleagues and research scholars from School of Management. I welcome you once again, as Dean has already welcomed, to the second International Research Conference. This is the second successive conference we are holding. We started this journey last year in February 2021. And you'll be happy to know that out of 97 full papers that we received after 3-stage review, 30 have been selected for speaker publication, which is likely to come out soon. We hope to see a qualitative improvement continuously in this journey. The theme of this year's conference, as already stated, simplicity, and resilience, as experienced by the society in general and business in particular in the context of the pandemic. Listening to Professor Mishra, I was reminded of a book written by Paul Kennedy, who actually tried to find out why the great powers, they rise and fall, and where are the roots of this rise and fall. So he traced, this book came out sometime in 1980. And this book traced 500 years of world history. And it found that behind all the chaos lies principles of economics. So every crisis, every chaos is predictable. I'll draw a point from here in what I'm going to say. The world was in chaos during 2020. I don't think there is any doubt or dispute about this. Entire 2020 went in chaos. The pandemic impacted all aspects of our life, not just in healthcare systems, but also business, work, education, etc. Whether somebody is a field worker or off-field worker, everybody got affected. Life had come to a partial paralysis, but then slowly people learned how to move on, move from a reactive state of shock and inaction to a responsive, proactive state of resilience and fight back. And that is what we have tracked for the year 2021. The whole 2021 has been a year of resilience. When historians will sit down to write the history of last 2 years, the perspective will become much clearer, as neither the situation arrived out of the blue as it appears now. No, everybody thinks that a virus in Wuhan has caused all this. Historians may not agree with this, nor the solution to all the challenges that we have seen during the last 2 years can get addressed within a short span of time, say a year or two. To get a vaccine and challenges is resolved. No, it's not. The average span of dealing with global catastrophes in the past, whether it is a catastrophe caused by a disease or a catastrophe caused by a war, if you look at human history, the average span of dealing with catastrophes has been over decades, not less than 10 years at any point of time. So there will be no exception now, watch my words. The earliest we can expect the New World Order to emerge with absolute clarity would be 2030. Until then, it is resilience and resilience at play everywhere in every aspect of our lives. So what we are seeing is the early stage of resilience. Don't take it as the final stage. I am sure the researchers, while they will be presenting the paper, they will be basically indicating trends. They cannot give a full stop that, okay, in this particular aspect of life, our resilience is over. I mean, we have come on top of the situation. But then we have an immediate task in hand. What matters most in life is to get up when we fall as soon as possible and get going. So the people of the world, from scientists to commoners, have proved equal to this task we have seen last year. And we have recovered with great courage and grit. The relative low impact of the third wave of human life, work, and business has as much to do with the vaccine as with something interesting, the attitude of caution and adoption of hygienic habits voluntarily adopted by people as part of our new culture. Remember, the DNA of a resilient society is embedded in its culture. We are undergoing right now a great cultural transformation. Professor Misra passingly mentioned about the war in Ukraine. If you keep a bottle, the cap of the bottle, cork of the bottle, for far too long and not open it in time, then when it opens, it explodes. That's what you are seeing. So see the correlation. You know, the COVID-19 crisis had actually put that cork for far too long, did not allow sufficient exchange of words on diplomacy during last 2 years, because everybody's focus was only on how to deal with the virus. And when you lose that focus, do not give appropriate time, diplomacy takes time, then, you know, the moment the cork is open, it explodes. And that's what we have noticed. And this is not the only one example that we are going to witness. We'll see many more. This DNA keeps morphing with new challenges and new solutions that shall emerge. Throughout the day, we shall see many well-researched scholastic presentations. I am told 45 scholastic presentations will be made through 5 technical sessions on how resilience has helped us to face the crisis and overcome its gravity, but also it will throw some light perhaps how a new culture emerges with the DNA, such as transformation of work, workplace, work rules, and even the legal environment of work. All these have undergone transformation or undergoing transformation, and it takes time. For example, legislation will take time, but given a span of a decade, you will find maybe we will never be able to recognize, okay, this kind of labor laws we are having in our country before, this kind of economic laws or policies we are having in our country once upon a time, these kind of questions will come. I can give many more examples, but I will refrain from it now for the sake of time. I hope by the end of the day, this conference will have got readied with a book of secrets about the DNA of resilience in the pandemic times. I wish all the technical paper presenters, my best wishes, and I thank our esteemed VC for all the encouragement she gave us, Professor P.K.J. Mahapatra, the guest of honor, and other two keynote speakers who will be addressing us in the afternoon for sparing their valuable time and being with us. But foremost, my thank goes to all the people who have contributed seminal papers for this conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
We have Dr. Pratap K.J. Mahapatra as our guest of honor. He is a postgraduate in engineering who is working as Professor Emeritus, KIIT University. He has over 40 years of teaching experience and he had carried out research and consultancy covering several diverse subjects. Professor Mahapatra was working for 2 years at Regional Engineering College, Rourkela, and thereafter he has been at IIT Kharagpur, working in different capacities. He has specialized in industrial engineering and management, and his area of interest are production operation management, systems engineering, e-business, and quantitative modeling. He has published in more than 75 reputed international journals and authored 2 books. He was a member of the Board of Governors of IIT Kharagpur and at present is on the board of Braithwaite & Co. Limited and CMP-DIL. Sir, please address the conference.
Professor Achyuta Samanta, the guiding spirit behind KIET and KIIS universities. Professor Susmita Samanta, Honorable Vice Chancellor, KIET University. Professor Mahapatra, Director, and Professor Mishra, Dean, KIET School of Management. Professor Tripathi, Professor Kar, faculty colleagues of KIET School of Management and KIET University. Delegates to the conference and friends. Good morning to all of you. It's an honor to deliver the inaugural address before this august body of academicians, researchers, and professionals. It appears to me very strange that I am speaking to this learned body offline. In a sense, although it's online, I call it offline, oblivious of the presence to whom I am speaking to, speaking in a vacuum and in monologue. Such a situation to me reflects our ability to adapt ourselves to the vagaries of the coronavirus outbreak, this being an excellent instance of our resilience to an unexpected extraneous intervention. We have used new technology to thwart nature's wrath and conduct our business in a new way to achieve our purpose of sharing and learning from one another. This is the new normal, a new form of dynamic equilibrium, which we have arrived at after periods of onslaught of uncertainty and chaos caused by severe perturbations by an external agent called coronavirus, which has disrupted our environment, our normal activities, and our normal life. The theme of this conference is chaos, complexity, and resilience, business and society in pandemic context. The theme could well have been complexity, chaos, and resilience, etc. Because complexity can lead to chaos, and chaos disturbs equilibrium and requires conscious, creative intervention to restore normalcy. The word complexity, just as the word system, finds frequent and numerous use in our dialogues and discourses. Both the words have a long pedigree. A system is generally understood as an interconnected complex of functionally related components. Robert Simon, the author of 1962 article on the architecture of complexity, defined complexity as a property of a system that's made up of a large number of parts that interact in a non-simple way. Now, it is almost universally accepted that it is not the number of parts, but the ways the parts interact, which is the fundamental cause of complexity. Uncertain, unpredictable behavior is a characteristic feature of a complex system. This implies a probabilistic view of nature. I recall an oft-quoted statement due to Einstein, who refuted this probabilistic view by saying, God doesn't play dice with the world. I also wish to recall a statement by Russian scientist Rastrogin in his book, This Chancy World, that the world appears probabilistic to us because of our inability to see things for ourselves. A view that is largely accepted by the scientific community is that complexity is caused due to nonlinear interactions among parts. I underline the word nonlinear, and due to interacting feedback loops. Once again, I underline interacting feedback loops that either exacerbate or resist changes to the system. A short journey to the historicity of complexity theory leads us first to the Newtonian ontology of determinism and simplicity, where mind and free will had no role, and there was no place for creativity, and knowledge was observer independent. As Professor Misra told, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle and Einstein's relativity theory opposed Newtonian determinism. Parallelly, systems theory and cybernetics recommended different frameworks of complexity theory. Systems theory had its genesis in GST, General Systems Theory, by Bartalanffy, a biologist, who developed the theory of open systems and gave concepts of transfer of energy and matter across the boundary separating a system from its environment. He and his followers, most prominently George Miller, pioneering theory of living systems, spoke about isomorphisms, homeostasis, and ultrastability. Systems theory emphasized holism and emergent behavior, but both concepts at that time remained mystical. Cybernetics was championed by Norbert Wiener as the theory of control and communication in the animal and the machine. Following Wiener, Ashby and Stafford Beer considered knowledge as subjective and information feedback as the building block of dynamic systems. Concepts of autonomy, self-organization, biological evolution, and adaptability were introduced. The term second-order cybernetics was coined to mean the role of the observer and the regulator in controlling the behavior of the system. In this context, mention must be made of J.W. Forester's work on system dynamics with its underlying principles of the structure and behavior of such systems, and which have found wide use in many fields. These developments point to the aspect of an organization that patterns are not just given, they are created. They evolve out of a tangle of interacting forces and random fluctuations, bringing order out of chaos. A book written by Prigozhin, the Nobel laureate. Chaos occurs in deterministic systems when initial state variables are perturbed. They look like stochastic behavior, but are products of perfectly deterministic cause-effect relationships. Today, theory of chaos is well developed, but the challenge is how to conceptualize the structure of this deterministic system if its behavior is chaotic. This is the problem of what in control theory they say an identification problem, a system identification problem. Theory, unfortunately, is very scanty in this respect. The possibility that we create causal models using virtual worlds based on our mental images and simulate the models to see whether it is able to create the chaotic behavior. In this respect, agent-based simulation appears to present a promising possibility. Agents are autonomous objects who interact with neighboring agents, follow scheme-based rules or heuristics based on the principles of blind variation and natural selection to satisfy local goals. Emergent behavior and self-organization or co-evolution occur due to the totality of impact of agent behavior on the whole system. Uncertainty, thus, is a challenge that our policymakers in organizations and society must accept. Like agents, they must give autonomy and delegate authority to employees at hierarchies at the bottom. They must scan environment, use local resources, coalesce and cooperate with competitors in adversities, use intelligence to capture the perception of employees, customers, and people at large. The policies they make should be evidence-based. For this, it is necessary to use Industry 4.0 technologies to collect and store data using digital technology and cloud computing. Use machine learning and data analytics tools and take bold, timely decisions. Finally, let's understand that modeling and prior testing of policies before implementation is the key to achieving the new normal. The papers to be presented at the conference display a variety of applications of how brave decisions were taken to avert crises resulting from the pandemic. I sincerely believe that researchers will analyze these cases, glean out essential modeling strategies, and build creative, integrative, multidisciplinary approaches to thwart such vagaries of nature and reach new dynamic equilibrium. I thank you once again for inviting me and listening to me patiently. I wish that despite the distance that separates us, we shall be able to communicate effectively and build strong relationships. Best wishes to all of you for a satisfying exchange of views and a healthy future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your kind word and your valuable time. As small token of appreciation, we have planted a tree on your behalf. I now call our esteemed director, Dr. S.K. Mahapatra, to hand over the tree plantation certificate.
Thank you, Professor Mahapatra, and thanks all of you for this kind gesture.
Now we'd like to request the respected dignitaries to release the e-book of Asteroid.
We are honored to have with us Dr. Trilochan Tripathi, who currently is a professor of finance in XLRI. Dr. Tripathi has over 18 years of strong research consultation and management training experience. His current research interests are in the broad areas of market integration, currency risk modeling, banking liquidity crisis and regulations, and asset pricing and valuations. He has published over 50 articles, and some of them are in the Journal of Applied Economics, Journal of Quantitative Economics, and Resources Policy. His current teaching interest lies in the areas of corporate finance, international financial management, and computational finance. Dr. Tripathi has also mentored PhD scholars in several fields of finance. Sir, kindly address the conference.
This I hope I'm audible,
Yes, sir.
and PPT is also visible to all of you.
Yes, sir. It is visible.
Good morning. I am extremely privileged to be part of this conference and delivering the keynote address in this inaugural session. I would like to express my thanks and appreciation for the invitation extended to me by the KIT University of Bhubaneswar to give the keynote address at the second international conference on management research on chaos, complexity, and resilience, business and society in pandemic context. The theme of this conference couldn't be more relevant, timely, and unique in these difficult times. When the entire humanity is undergoing the devastating effects of the ferocious novel coronavirus pandemic, I would like to take this opportunity to extend my heartfelt heartfelt condolences, deepest sympathy to millions of families who have lost their loved ones, relatives, and friends to this deadly disease. I also take this opportunity to thank Professor Sasmita Rani Samanta, Vice Chancellor of KIT University, Professor P.K.J. Mahapatra, Professor Emeritus, KIT University, Professor S.K. Mahapatra, and Professor S.N. Mishra, and Professor Braja Vallabhkar, convener of this conference, and the organizers. Also, I extend my well wishes to paper presenters and participants of this conference. I am evidently optimistic that this day-long conference would provide platform for learning and networking opportunity to the researchers. It is reported that the world has witnessed outbreak of several communicable diseases. In the form of endemics, epidemics, and pandemics over last century. And mention may be made a few such events: Great Plague, the Black Death. These are the major virus-related diseases which has really triggered sometimes pandemic, endemic, or epidemic. Now, if you just go back to this coronavirus pandemic here, definitely it has given extended loss to the society in many different dimensions. Now, if we just talk about, let's say, the recent development in the coronavirus, what has happened in the world, and one of such, let's say, informations, I would like to draw your attention, and that it has really given a wide scar and fear across different segments of the world. You will see the stringency index. The stringency index is suggesting that still there are many parts of the world, the countries are not they have not opened up their education, they have not opened the businesses and industrial activities, and many more. Therefore, the scar still remains. You will further see that the kind of your death, it is still continuing across different parts of the world. It is really going up and up over the period of time. Therefore, this also suggests that the kind of scar and fear it has really created in the society. Recently, if you just go through the World Health Organization chief address, while he was addressing the Munich Security Conference of 2022, who stated that the novel coronavirus pandemic, which originated from Wuhan, China, cases rapidly swept the world and locked it down in less than 6 months as it reached global proportions. The COVID-19 has since evolved, mutated, killing millions globally and infected many more, and episodes is not over but not cream now. While mitigating the virus transmission, countries across the globe implemented stringent measures such as mandatory national lockdown and the border closures and global trade restrictions affecting production, disrupting diverse global supply chains, straining means of livelihoods, and unsettling the financial markets. To minimize global socioeconomic damage and trade disruptions, many governments, international institutions, corporates, and philanthropic organizations have taken several actions. Central banks have deliberately extended special funds and packages to extend loan exemptions and grants to businesses, debt relief, salary payments to the unemployed, food for needy, purchase of medical equipment, and construction of new emergency hospital, and many other measures. Now, the rest of the keynote, I would like to really organize in this particular order. First, I'm going to give you some sort of your, let's say, account of the kind of your global scale impact your COVID-19 has exerted in terms of your negative context. Second, how it has really disrupted the global healthcare supply chain. Then, was there any kind of a positive impact which you have really got it from this COVID-19? We are going to really touch upon that. Finally, I have developed a simple framework of your healthcare supply chain in the Indian context, which may give a food for thought for the researchers who are working in this particular domain. Then finally, I'll go with the concluding remarks. Now, if we just go back to the, let's say, the kind of, let's say, negative impact the COVID-19 has exerted, it is really massive in terms of your massive health crisis and in terms of this disproportionate social order. And it has really given a direction that your global GDP has contracted like anything else. The socioeconomic activities has crippled manufacturing activity, travel and tourism industries has been really, almost it has been really, let's say, half destroyed. Heightened trade restrictions and protectionism has really some such your major negative impacts this virus has exerted. The IMF has also estimated a colossal economic loss, where cumulative global GDP loss between 2020 and 25 would be around $22 trillion. And if you see especially airline industry, it has really had a loss of closely $324 billion and in the year 2021 and $200 billion in the 2022. Now, these are the estimates given by the top-notch global bodies, and definitely there is no point to really disbelieve in this. Now, if you see the further, the kind of international, let's say, tourism crash it has brought into the limelight, it has brought closely $4 trillion loss to this global GDP. Now, if you see the social context, the unemployment and the risk of food insecurity, it has really heightened or like anything else. It is due to the lockdown and your broader trade restrictions. Now, apart from that, apart from the massive job losses, excessive income inequality, global poverty, and illiteracy is like to increase for the first time since 1998. These are some repeated studies which are really giving you this direction, sir. Now, if you go back to the your extreme poverty, and this COVID-19 has really pushed closely 49 million people, especially in the sub-Saharan African region, which is definitely estimated by our UN body. Now, if you see the kind of your disruption it has created in the equity market, and the kind of fear and risk it has really spread across different asset classes, and which has really destroyed trillions of dollars for the investors and all that. If you see the commodity price has really increased due to short supply, which has really triggered the inflation all across different parts of the world. Fear of stagflation is also appearing in many parts of the world because the economy is stagnant more or less. At the same point in time, your inflation is triggering. Now, industries are also struggling to manage operation with resource constraints. And governments across the world came up with diverse measures and economic packages to cope up with the grave situation created by the COVID-19. But if you see, COVID-19 has also exerted some positive impact. It has improved our air quality. It has reduced the environmental noise, increased cleanliness of the beaches. There are few studies which I have really highlighted here. They are supporting these arguments. Now, especially if you see the rate of change of global primary energy demand since 1990, And during your global, during this COVID-19, you can clearly see that out here. This global primary energy use or the demand has really declined because of the lockdown and all that, no? Because of which it has really reduced. You can compare with this, let's say, decrease in global primary energy with your World War II and all other, let's say, major macroeconomic event which has happened in the past. And this gives an indication that, yes, definitely energy use has declined, which has really given a direction, a positive direction to the environment to respond to. Now, therefore, the decline in primary energy use has really helpful to the our environment and ecosystem. And in a way, it is also having some sort of your direction towards your business and economy, and which has really boosted digitization. And this digitization can happen in the different domains of your business and your economy. Now, the war is still not over. If you see that right now, the share of people who completed the initial COVID-19 vaccination protocol, now the major countries, especially developed countries, they're having a fair share. And still, though India is not lagging behind, but it's around, let's say 55% of your coverage it has been made. But if you see, on the other hand, the underdeveloped countries like Burundi, Chad, Haiti, Yemen, and other things, no, hardly, maybe even they have not reached up to your 10% of their, let's say, population. That is definitely worrying the world. And it has to be really addressed with a common goal. It's not that these people are getting affected because of that problem. It is because of definitely a global event. Therefore, they have to be taken into considerations, and world has to really respond to that. If we'll just talk about right now, the kind of, let's say, the fossil fuels you are trading with, and definitely you are trading in the wrong direction. Though you are saying that the energy use has declined, but after this, let's say, phase of your, let's say, lockdown and all that, once again, the fossil fuel use has really gone up. The trading of these, let's say, coal, natural gases, and petroleum products have really gone up. That also indicates that we have not really understood much of the things, or we have not learned much from this particular pandemic. Now, if we just talk about your international trade, it is back, no doubt, but it is back in the major emerging economies or developed economies. But if you talk about the underdeveloped part of the world, still definitely they're struggling with. Therefore, something has to be done in a global context so that everybody is going to get the fair share of the international trade. Now, the good news is that global trade is back and it is uptrend, and emerging economies and developed economies are doing well now, and they have recovered to the extent. But the question remains whether this trade revival is going to happen in favor of the underdeveloped countries or not. And if it is not going to happen, definitely the kind of prediction have been made by the global bodies, like the poverty, illiteracy, and food insecurity is going to be definitely extended. Unemployment is going to be really extended in those countries. Now, given this backdrop, definitely we are getting some sort of sense that your world economic model, based on which you are really going ahead with, definitely it is not sustainable, it is irrelevant. And this global, this crisis, COVID-19 crisis, has distorted the world's operating assumptions and dominant economic models to respond to the crisis. And if you talk about, let's say, why this crisis happened, especially our excessive dependency on the globalization and economic growth as drivers of your green investment and sustainable development is no longer realistic. Therefore, there is a need of a modification of the world economic model and the global supply chain. To talk about the excessive dependency, it has happened because of also over centralization of the complex global supply and production chains. Therefore, we should not depend exclusively on the foreign supplies or your centralized supply from a specific country. There is a need of your diversification of this your dependency, and the country needs to really pursue some sort of pure policy where this sort of your, let's say, over centralization is to be removed. One of the most vulnerable supply chain during COVID-19 remained the healthcare supply chain. Now, if you talk about this healthcare supply chain, definitely is one of the very complex, let's say, supply chain compared to many other, let's say, your supply chains. And severe crisis of critical medical supplies has affected hospitals globally, and it has been definitely, let's say, studied by several authors, but I have quoted one of the, let's say, such important literature here. And it has happened because of the export ban, border crossing restrictions, and infection prevention measures were prominent root causes of these challenges. And if you talk about your, let's say, this crisis, your supply chain, let's say, dependency or the scarcity in this particular critical medical supplies, because of our high dependency on the global supply chain, our overstrained suppliers and the manufacturers were the root cause of this lack of medical supplies. Further, if you talk about your healthcare manufacturers had to definitely cope up with the supply shortages for the futures. If they do not do so, definitely that resiliency of the healthcare global supply chain is going to be questioned in the future. Now, how to really cope up with this, let's say, healthcare supply chain, let's say, vulnerability? The first of all, and the COVID-19 pandemic has revealed the vulnerability of the global supply chain, and which warrants better supply chain resilience. And minimizing such dependencies could enable a more robust supply chain in the face of the crisis. Importance of diversifying the production of needed materials and to ensure a more risk-resilient supply chain is highly required in this particular situation. Increased attention on ways to improve supply chain and building their resilience is also going to be the order of the day. If the countries could not really do this sort of things, fail to make some sort of arrangement or appropriate policy initiative couldn't be taken in these particular directions, definitely the world may face similar kind of strains in the future. Now, if you talk about the research studies, especially in the context of the healthcare supply chain and its resilience, it is highly limited. And especially in the context of your COVID, it is also not much there. I found out few literatures which I have quoted here, but I didn't find much of the literature in the context of India. Therefore, this is going to give me a glaring gap in the domain of healthcare supply chain resilience, and which needs to draw the attention of the researcher. Now, I have presented this particular idea over here. Definitely the researchers, those who are really working in this domain, they'll be able to really think through that how complex this supply chain is, especially in the Indian context. Suppose you are having medical component input suppliers, and we are receiving this year, let's say, medical components or inputs, either from the domestic market or from the foreign market. Now, if you talk in the context of your, let's say, these supplies are limited. And whenever there is restriction, even within the domestic suppliers are unable to really, let's say, supply those goods and services. Therefore, it is creating constraint even within the domestic territory. The moment you have some kind of your restrictions or your lockdowns, even input suppliers are having those resources are there and still they fail to really supply to the medical supply manufacturers. Now, if it is there in the foreign countries, definitely there is cross-border issues. And that issue is definitely putting a lot of pressure on the medical supplies manufacturers. These manufacturers, though having other, let's say, inputs with them, but certain important inputs like your chemicals and all of the things, they are definitely not receiving the appropriate point in time. Therefore, it is straining the supply chain. Then if you talk about your, let's say, further down the line, the kind of your, let's say, medical supplies manufactured because of the lockdown and all of the situations or restrictions across the state government restrictions at different point in time, definitely these medical supplies distributors are not really receiving the goods and services in the appropriate manner. Therefore, which is creating a chaos in the healthcare, let's say, system, in the sense that the healthcare provider, those who are in the dire need of these medical supplies, including your medicines and all other instruments which are really highly required to give the support to the patients, they are not really receiving it. And in some such situation, some foreign government supplies, medical supplies comes in, but there is an issue with the distribution in our government. There is no proper coordination. And that coordination is also affecting how to really reach those your goods and services by which your healthcare provider will be able to really extend the proper medical facilities to the patients at the time of a crisis. Now, over and above this scenario, now one can understand that how complex this particular, let's say, healthcare supply chain is. Now, keeping that in mind, if we talk about your, let's say, medical healthcare supply chain, definitely you will just come to the conclusion that Indian healthcare supply chain is, especially in particular, it's a complex web that consists of broad ranges of activities and relies on each partner of this chain, starting from the supplier to the customer. The healthcare supply chain is highly fragmented. If you talk about your, let's say, medical manufacturer, there are small and minor manufacturers. There are some manufacturing units in the government space and your PPP, let's say, front as well. And government also manufacturing some sort of your medical supplies and all that. Therefore, given the situation in mind, definitely it is highly fragmented and it is not having much of a coordination across different levels of your supply chain. Further, your incompetent infrastructure, that means your lack of your robust cold chain network. And suppose you need some sort of your, let's say, vaccines or the medicines or something of that, so you'd like to really keep it and under your freezing conditions, and you do not have such facilities, and you cannot really dump, let's say, elsewhere. Therefore, those kind of infrastructural bottlenecks is also paving the role for your how this particular medical supply chain is going to be really dependent on these infrastructures. Now, if you talk about the exporting, importing of the goods and the materials from your multiple regions of the foreign countries, the quality compliance and the regulatory policies and export formalities are headed by different authorities. Therefore, this has to be really mitigated. It has to be managed appropriately, coordinated appropriately. Then only we'll be able to build a resilient healthcare supply chain. Now, if you talk in the context of your healthcare supply chain resiliency, just give me a moment. Now, this, let's say, COVID-19 has created a huge, let's say, disruptions in the event. Now, to respond back to the normalcy, it has taken pretty longer period of time. Now, we need to build right now this healthcare supply chain in such a fashion that it is going to have less, let's say, disruption if some such event happens in the future. Hence, to do so, we have to have different varieties of your, let's say, measures, or we have to make necessary arrangements beforehand so that we'll be able to manage this crisis in the future. Sorry, just give me a moment. Now, against this backdrop, I would like to give a thought to the researcher here. Now, those who are working in this direction, can they think of the following, let's say, can they address following research questions? What are the factors responsible for the sluggish response of the Indian healthcare supply chain? Why the governments and your private hospitals couldn't really manage this crisis immediately? Was there any, let's say, way out to really manage that? Or can you really build up some kind of a resilience in the system for the future? What are the causes of external sources dependencies? We are having dependencies. Can you map those resources? What are the areas in which you are having this, let's say, dependencies? How can healthcare supplies manufacturers circumvent the external dependencies of the raw material in pandemic-like situation? How to build resilience into the Indian healthcare supply chain? How to reduce the redundancy and poor alignment of the coordination at various levels of Indian healthcare supply chain? Whether blockchain and digitization would improve Indian healthcare supply chain? If so, how can we digitize and build AI-enabled Indian healthcare supply chain? What are the policy initiatives desired at different levels of your healthcare supply chain in India? If you could address this particular, let's say, research questions, I'm saying definitely it is going to give a direction to the, let's say, policymakers and your industry practitioners to think in a particular directions how to build a resilient healthcare supply chain in the future. Once again, I thank you, each one of you, for the patient hearing and giving me this opportunity to address this conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for your kind word and your valuable time. As a small token of appreciation, we have planted a tree on your behalf. I now call our esteemed director, Dr. S.K. Mahapatra, to hand over the tree plantation certificate.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
We at KIT School of Management thank Professor Trilochan Tripathi for your valuable contribution as a recognition we have contributed towards planting a tree at your premises in our honor. Thank you, sir.
To give the vote of thanks, we have Professor Rajaballavkar, KIIT School of Management. He has earned his PhD from School of Management. His research interest includes entrepreneurship. I request Professor Rajaballavkar to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Isan. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I feel honored and humbled among the illustrious dignitaries of this conference and consider it a privilege to offer vote of thanks. I express my gratitude to our honorable founder for his wholehearted support to research and publication. Our Vice Chancellor, who could not be present but has been the guiding spirit for quality research, her words inspire many. This conference owes a lot to her guidance and help. Thank you very much, ma'am. Our Dean Sir, Professor Misra, has been a constant source of inspiration for his immaculate communication and wisdom. It's a privilege to listen to him each time. Thank you, sir, for your nuggets on ethics, economics, Bitcoin, nationalism, and uncertainty. I thank you for your deliberations today. I thank you, our director, for his unwavering belief in the processes and the ability of a knowledge organization to operate in an autopilot mode. The conference represents his determination, support, and monitoring. The point he brought out that the culture of resilience or resilience is embedded in culture is one of the most important points that we can take it from this conference. Thank you very much, sir. I have learned personally a lot of things from PKJ Mahapatra, sir. He's very precise and persuasive. You would have noticed that also in his talk today. He's a mentor par excellence. Thank you, sir, for sharing your thoughts today. Professor Tripathi stands out for his commitment to research and hard work. His deliberation today on the Indian healthcare supply chain and the possible research outcomes or research areas is going to be very valuable to the researchers who are attending this conference and subsequently. I sincerely feel fortunate that we could hear you today, sir. Thank you very much. I take this opportunity to thank few who are not present or not able to attend. However, I start my thank you for our previous convener, my guide, Professor Sudhi, who has given his time, explained various intricacies of a conference and suggested options. This conference owes it to you, sir, and thank you very much. I do appreciate it. Organizing committee members, Professor Surjit Kaur of IBS Hyderabad, Professor Ashish Panda, Nalsar Hyderabad, Professor Ramkrishna Padi, IIM Sambalpur, Professor Mamta Padi, Roehampton Business School, UK, have supported the conference at various stages in guiding, reviewing, and encouraging. I owe a sincere thank to all of you. My co-convener, Professor Sikta Singh, has put her best effort and hard work for the conference, even if she was not well. I think she deserves sincere thanks. Her prior experience and enthusiasm for this conference merits a sincere thanks. Thank you, ma'am. I must thank also Samabes Babu, who was available for consultation even when he was not well. A man of few words, but silent action. Thank you, Samabes Babu, and whole admin staff. And lastly, I cannot really stop admiring our student volunteers who have actually risen to the occasion and within a short notice too. Student volunteers have been our strength. I cannot thank them enough. I acknowledge, at the last actually, I acknowledge any limitations that could have happened in the process. I wish future conferences and conveners good luck and great success. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
With this, we come to an end of the inaugural part of the conference. I request the paper presenters to kindly log on to the respective VR. We will begin the technical session 1 discussion immediately. Second technical session will begin at 3 p.m. Valedictory session for keynote address with Professor Justin Paul and Professor Tapas Mishra will have the same link as of the inaugural session and will begin at 4:30 p.m. Thank you.